Andrew and Emily had been married for 7 years, both around 30 years old. Andrew worked at a logistics company, a stable, dependable job that he genuinely enjoyed. He was well respected for his dedication and calm nature. Meanwhile, Emily managed a small flower shop of her own, something she had dreamed of even before they got married. At one point, she had suggested that Andrew quit his job so they could run the shop together as a family business. However, Andrew wasn't ready to leave a secure position that he truly loved. Despite this, they were both doing well, each carving out their own career paths. One evening, Emily's parents came over for dinner. The house was filled with laughter, and the table was packed with delicious food. Emily had a certain sparkle in her eyes. Suddenly, she cleared her throat and spoke. "Mom, Dad, Andrew, I have some news," she said, exhaling shakily. "We're going to have a baby." A moment of stunned silence quickly turned into cheers of excitement. Emily's mother even began crying tears of joy. Andrew was completely taken aback. They had been trying to have a child for a long time without success, and he had started to fear it might never happen. So this felt like an absolute miracle. Over the next 9 months, Andrew was overjoyed, practically floating on air. He catered to Emily's every craving and pampered her at every opportunity. Finally, their daughter was born. Emily let Andrew choose a name, and they decided to call her Lily. Andrew was absolutely captivated by his little girl. As soon as he finished work, he would rush home to give Emily a break from taking care of the baby. Thanks to his support, Emily was able to continue managing her flower shop without having to pass on too many responsibilities to others. In fact, Andrew made it a priority to send Emily on a little getaway every 6 months or so, a peaceful weekend at a nature resort, giving her a chance to relax and recharge. When Lily turned 5, Emily became pregnant again. Andrew was overjoyed. Given the struggles they had faced before having their first child, he had sometimes wondered if he might be infertile, even though the doctor had assured him that everything was fine. So when Emily held up that positive pregnancy test, Andrew practically leaped with excitement. "Maybe this time it'll be a boy," Emily teased. "As long as the baby is healthy, sweetheart," Andrew grinned, pulling her into a warm embrace. "I could really use a break, by the way," Emily added. "Do you think you could book me that resort trip next month?" It was an extra getaway, outside their usual schedule, but Andrew didn't hesitate. He was over the moon about the pregnancy and would do anything for his wife, especially now. Emily left for her relaxing retreat and returned a week later, her belly slightly bigger. One day at Andrew's job, a new client arrived, David. The first thing Andrew noticed about him was how impeccably dressed he was, an immaculate suit, a confident smile, and a distinctive heart-shaped birthmark on his neck. They shook hands and discussed the details of an upcoming shipping contract. "So, you're the one I've been told to speak with for all the specifics?" David asked with a smirk. They worked through necessary details, and as David was about to leave, he turned and asked, "So, are you married?" "Yes, happily," Andrew replied, slightly puzzled. "I have a wife and a young daughter." "Interesting," David said with an unreadable expression. "I have my reasons for asking." With that, he walked away. It was a strange remark, but Andrew didn't think much of it. David was a valuable business contact, sharp and professional. Meanwhile, Emily's due date was approaching, and she had become more irritable and short-tempered. She would pick fights with Andrew over the smallest things. Still, Andrew remained patient, assuming that once the baby arrived, the tension would subside. Then, the day of the birth finally came, and Andrew was filled with excitement. Andrew had been adamant about being present in the delivery room, wanted to witness the birth of their second child. However, Emily outright dismissed the idea, which escalated into a heated argument. In the middle of the night, she suddenly woke him, her voice urgent. She was in labor. Their second child was on the way. Andrew could hardly contain his excitement. They had deliberately chosen not to learn the baby's gender in advance, preferring the thrill of surprise. They had already picked out names. If it was another girl, she would be named Polly. If it was a boy, they would call him Miles. Early the next morning, Andrew received a message from Emily. It contained a picture and a simple note. "Congratulations, we have another daughter." His heart swelled with joy as he gazed at the image. He immediately showed it to Lily, who marveled at the tiny new addition to their family. A day later, David, the same David from the shipping contract, unexpectedly contacted Andrew regarding an urgent business matter. He requested a meeting, despite it being Andrew's day off. Ever professional, Andrew agreed. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in a shopping mall, where Andrew was already running errands for Emily and the newborn. Upon arriving, Andrew spotted David waiting for him. "Hey, David," Andrew greeted as they shook hands. He placed a folder of documents on the table. David, glancing at Andrew's shopping bags, smirked. "Stocking up? I bet your wife and newborn are expecting a lot from you." Andrew chuckled, pride evident in his voice. "Yeah, my wife gave birth just 3 days ago. I'm making sure they have everything they need." David's expression turned unreadable. "I know." Andrew blinked, momentarily thrown off. "You know what?" David's tone remained steady. "I know your wife had a baby." Confusion flickered across Andrew's face. Before he could ask further, David pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. On the screen was a text, identical to one Andrew had received. "Congratulations, we have a daughter." It was accompanied by the exact same picture Emily had sent him. Andrew felt his stomach tighten. I don't understand. Why do you have that? What are you trying to show me?" A cold dread coiled in his gut, making him feel nauseous. David exhaled slowly. "Andrew, we're both adults. You deserve the truth. That baby is mine. I don't think Emily told you." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Andrew shot up from his seat, his knee bumping the table hard enough to send it tilting. Without another word, he grabbed his things and stormed out of the cafe, his heartbeat pounding so loudly that it drowned out all rational thought. He barely made it to his car before his hands started trembling. His mind spun in chaos, his vision blurred with unshed tears. No, he wouldn't confront Emily just yet. He needed proof. Maybe a discreet DNA test. No sense in making accusations without solid evidence. The next day was the baby's scheduled release from the hospital. Andrew arrived with flowers, his pulse hammering in his ears. As the nurse placed the newborn in his arms, he unwrapped the blanket and examined the tiny face, desperate for some resemblance to himself. Then, as he gently removed the baby's hat, his breath caught in his throat. There on the infant's delicate neck was a heart-shaped birthmark, identical to David's. Andrew's grip on the bouquet tightened. His voice was eerily calm. "Emily, what is this?" Emily froze, her expression flickering with panic before she forced a nervous smile. "Oh, my grandmother had one like that, I think." Andrew's gaze locked onto hers. "Why are you lying to me?" His voice was sharp, demanding. Emily's bravado crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes as she broke down completely. Between sobs, she confessed everything. She had met David at one of the relaxation retreats Andrew had so lovingly arranged for her. What started as harmless conversation turned into an affair. When she realized she was pregnant, she considered terminating the pregnancy. But then Andrew, overjoyed by the news, had unknowingly backed her into a corner. She couldn't bear to shatter his happiness. David had begged her to leave Andrew, but when it became clear that he wanted nothing to do with Lily, Emily chose to stay. Andrew stood motionless, absorbing her words. Then, without another sound, he turned on his heel and walked out of the hospital. The first call he made was to David. In a voice void of emotion, he informed him that he was filing for divorce, that he intended to retain full custody of Lily, and that David could collect Emily and her belongings at any time. A couple of years later, Andrew sold his apartment and moved to another city with Lily, determined to rebuild his life. Emily moved in with David, and at first, everything seemed fine. But as time passed, David's behavior shifted. He became critical, belittling Emily's appearance and constantly finding faults in her every action. He refused to lift a finger around the house, issuing orders instead. Emily tried to reignite the warmth she had once felt in her marriage with Andrew, but David remained cold and distant. Then came the physical abuse. The first slap left her stunned. After that, the bruises became easier to conceal under her clothing. She had burned bridges with friends who had sided with Andrew, leaving her isolated with no one to confide in. And then one day, David simply walked out, vanishing without a word. Emily was left alone with a child and the crushing weight of her choices. She had traded a stable, loving marriage for a fleeting infatuation, and in the end, she had nothing. Only now, in painful hindsight, did she grasp the full devastation of her betrayal.